I'm still finding this hamburger.
Also, I will regretfully have to say, perhaps as punishment for my offense of my own self-deprecation, last time I could not summon the muse to be able to write anything for this week.
Yep. Past week and a half have been fucking stressful for me, so me either.
There's not much we can do about the world ending.
Yeah. I'm working on reclaiming enough willpower. Not willpower. I don't know, enough fucking juice to do things.
Enough pepper.
Yeah, enough pepper.
I have at least been structuring something in my head for one of the poems that I said I was going to write, but I have yet to put any meat on the very, very haphazard skeleton I have in my brain.
Most of the writing I've been doing has been Mercenary Planet. I could probably read some of that.
Your girl's got some toxic Yuri this week.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
I'm not gonna read that scene, but yeah, there is some.
I'm gonna read my toxic Yuri.
Oh yeah. Okay, yeah.
But I have to find this fucking. I don't remember. Do you remember the name of this hamburger? It's so flat.
While you're looking for the burger, I came across a short poem that describes a type of character that I find interesting. I turn my head in scorn from them, my enemies, oppressors all, who cast me far from home, the gall they have, whose deeds I thus condemn. And as my words of condemnation spread, like words of gossip scarlet red, I gain my throngs of cheering fans, who though they read, don't understand. I turn my head in scorn to you, admirers, full of hate and fear, for all I chastise but hold dear. I love with venom, you hate with spew.
That was fun. That was like being crushed by a steamroller.
Wow, my fetish.
Actually, I cannot parse this image. I can't tell what's going on in it.
That looks like a fucked up McGriddle.
It's the Dick Ann's burger. I forgot that was his name.
That's terrible.
Hamburger Dick Ann's.
Jeez.
What a hamburger.
I've never heard of this thing.
People I only know about it because Americans American LA foodies asked me about it, and I was like, I'm not gonna eat this.
What?
You don't need my opinion on.
This is
I'm intrigued. I like the idea of
categorization.
I just like that their shtick was what if a hamburger was real flat?
The patty is about the same thickness as a cheap McDonald's, but I like the idea of treating the bun as naan bread.
Yeah, it's almost not even in the category of burger anymore. It's a different kind of sandwich.
But it's called Dick Ann's hamburger, and this is the hamburger. But how did they come up with it? It's the steamed hamburgers in Connecticut. Who was we're gonna build a special machine for steaming cheese blocks? That's lunacy. What? Why? It's not with Detroit pizza. It's we have these trays around, so it makes sense.
I mean, that's the only assumption I can really make. Is some machine must have been broken, and they're well, we can't clock out of the shift. So we gotta come up with some way to cook this.
This sandwich is unnecessary history.
Just stick it in the dishwasher and see what happens, man. I don't know.
It's just the Flaming Homer episode, basically. Alright, Gabe, you going? Am I going? Who's going?
You can go. I haven't totally picked out what I want to cover, so...
Let me get my notebook out and put the Warhammer away. Not my notebook, the computer. What the? Sorry, I'm sorry. Oh. Okay. So this is called, this is like the first short story I've properly sat down to write in like 4 years. So like, this is a test run. So this story is called, I Hope It's You. I understood I was gay in grade 9 when this very tall girl a few grades ahead of me kept picking me up and crushing me to her chest. I'm very short, and even now weird people tell me I look like a doll, and whatever a doll is, it somehow obliterates people's sense of personal space. I'd fallen in with some peripheral theater kids, bit parts and tech crew, and since they were theater kids, I got picked up pretty often. They would have stopped if I asked, but if they stopped, she would have stopped too. She was freckly. Her family had money, but instead of wearing new clothes, everything she wore was used, but nice. Vintage, she said, before that word was everywhere. Vintage Royal Stewart tartan jacket, vintage grey pashmina scarf, vintage beaver felt beret. Her social position should have been at an untouchable, rarefied height. She was sexy and talented, her family was rich, well, it seemed rich to me. She was an astonishing dresser and did just fine academically, but she was burdened by a rich fantasy life. She populated her notebooks with doodled anime characters. The only TV shows she watched were anime, and the only movies she liked were musicals, and the only book she liked that wasn't a manga was the Bible. When the teacher handed out tests, she folded her hands around the little gold cross that lived between her heart and the world and prayed. For a long time, I wasn't sure which she loved more, God or Stephen Sondheim. She sang like a motherfucker, but choked at auditions, and so only ever got chorus. Her eyes were two green mossy stones, and when they crashed into me, I shuddered. She was singing to the group, and then suddenly it felt like she was singing only to me. Just you and I, defying gravity. My hair was long, and I wore it down, in a kind of sad sack way. I took care of it, but mostly just used it to hide my face. I guess it bothered her because at lunch one day she put me in her lap and started braiding. Your hair is really beautiful, she said. You should do more with it. I told her I didn't know what to do. I'll teach you. As her hands graced my hair, I shivered. Blood made my cheeks red. I strained to hide all the tiny ways I writhed. And alone afterwards at my desk, I quaked until the last bell rang and quaked all the way home. She started cuddle puddles with herself and the other theater girls at lunchtime and pulled me into the middle. She draped her arms over my shoulders from behind like a boyfriend showing off his prize. And day after day, she did up my hair. I wanted to die. I wanted to kiss her. I wanted her to crush me to her chest. I wanted to go everywhere smelling her cheap rose and pomegranate body wash. I wanted her to tell me how cute I was, even if she pinched my cheeks. I wanted her to kill me. I wanted her to spit on my grave. I wanted her to fuck my face with her hands. Nobody had ever told me these were things a person could make you want, but I wanted them when she touched me. I wanted to lick the freckled skin on her collarbone, where that little gold cross always dangled. When gay marriage became legal, she said Paul Martin and everyone who voted for him was going to be raped in hell forever. She wasn't just Christian, she was very Christian, an uppity liberal's cartoon Christian, and while she mouthed off about premarital sex and narcotics and using curse words, the phrase holy shit was a pet peeve. Her spit only turned to venom for sodomites. Her disgusting cousin had decided he was a woman, probably to get some guy's attention, and he'd been in women's clothes at the last family reunion, and God was going to give him AIDS. And the fruity teacher who taught French in dance class, who was no shit named Monsieur Papillon, was a pedophile, and everyone knew, and he taught dance so he could ogle boys in tights. Ew! She shouted, apparently to nobody, and certainly not to the tenor from the theater club who just walked by with his boyfriend. It was a very cruel and stupid and funny fact whose cruelty and stupidity and funniness I wouldn't discover until I was much older and got into movies. Her legal name was Vivian fucking Bell. I loved her, and I loved her, and I loved her, and to this day, every time I think of her, some ghosty animal somewhere behind my lungs stirs in its sleep. For a while, I forgot I was gay. It started after I turned 16. The fact just abandoned me. That awful era lasted until I was 26, when a woman came up to me at a bar and asked me if I was Jewish. I burst out laughing. What a shitty pickup line. But I didn't correct her. Her hair was bleached silver and very short. She wore a thin paisley tie and a brown corduroy blazer, and said she made rings for a living. Snakes and scorpions decorated her hands. A big bust of Venus posing in a clamshell gleamed on her right middle finger. She bought me a drink that tasted like pomegranate and rose petals. We kissed in an alley even though it was fucking freezing and I was wearing a short skirt with tights. I played with her rings. I kissed her finger and took off the Venus and slid it onto my thumb, and she laughed. You like that, huh? I kept thinking about how funny it was, that all this felt okay, and that I wasn't scared at all. But from 16 to 26, it was only boys. I got pretty extreme about it. Like, for example, for one odd while, just after I turned 18, I decided to become a free-use fuck toy for a full house of guys. And it wasn't like a house of, like, chads. They were the shittiest kind of nerd. They argued about pop science bullshit and called each other retard and racial slurs and played Magic the Gathering and Team Fortress 2 with all their spare time, and all the while they drank themselves stupid. I could never convince myself that they didn't actually hate each other very deeply, each under the impression that he had some profound worldly advantage that the others didn't. They didn't have much in common beyond their interests, and of course, me. I fucked every single one. The house was rank, dishes happened maybe once every 2 weeks, garbage days were habitually missed until fermenting bags of microwave dinner trays and pizza crusts made us smell like dirty beer. Despite the fact that we had a washer and dryer in the basement, the bed sheets stayed musty. Their clothes were heavy with body smells, caked with Old Spice. They didn't shave or shampoo often enough. Their glasses were spotty with dust. Their teeth yellow and scuzzy. I sucked them off while they played Mario Kart online, while they watched hentai, when they were tired of programming or lab writing or whatever. They were all in school. I slept on a couch in the basement surrounded by my shoplifted clothes and books I'd stolen from libraries. Whenever anyone was stressed in the middle of writing a lab, they shook me awake and fucked me, then went back to typing. I think in those entire 3 months, maybe 4 or 5 days passed where I wasn't at least a bit wasted. I didn't eat much, cup noodles or bananas or scrambled eggs with Worcestershire sauce or cereal, and sometimes someone bought me McDonald's. On the rare night I wasn't needed, I drank and sat on my couch and listened to Rolling Girl on my Zen Micro and waited for sleep to come for me, hoping the whole night for heavy footsteps on the stairs. It was kind of fucking awesome. My favorite boy had a shelf over his bed that held nothing but expensive Rei Ayanami statuettes. He was one of those guys who would have done just fine dating if he stopped hating himself long enough to, like, shave and make a trip to Old Navy. He had me wear a Ray wig when he fucked me, and from his futon on the floor, as he grunted and panted, I looked up at row on row of that frosty ghost girl in dozens of hairstyles and get-ups and anatomically dubious seductive poses, like saints arrayed in tiny shrines. I thought, this is the happiest moment of my life, and meant it. However stupid it was. While he was fucking me, I'd started praying. I prayed to Rei Ayanami and felt some big incoherent salvation reaching out for me. Keep making those little sounds, he gasped. So I prayed until he nutted buckets on my stomach, then napped for 20 minutes, then went back downstairs to shout at the TV with the others. I took off the wig and took a 40-minute shower, the whole time thinking, this is the happiest moment of my life. Then spent the next half hour bent over the toilet throwing up. I was drunk. I'd been completely, genuinely at peace with hot water running over me, but when I stepped out of the shower, I'd realized that it wasn't my thought. It was theirs. It was what they thought, watching their shows, getting riled up about games, cardboard, and video, and fucking the house doll. This is the happiest moment of my life. When I was done throwing up, I blow-dried my hair. I put on perfume and clothes and the vintage red pleather jacket I'd stolen and went out to the bar where many years later I'd meet a woman with silver-dyed hair. That night, I met a guy in his early 20s who worked at a microbrewery. He didn't want to see me naked, he wanted me to step on him. I lived with him for a whole year and he never touched me once under any circumstances except when I was stepping on him. I found other guys while he was at work and didn't hide it. He seemed to like it. He loved me desperately. I ghosted him and found somebody else. 10 years I ran down that chain of boys just like that, one link to the next, until I reached the bottom link which connected to nothing and leapt into the arms of a beautiful silver-haired butch who spent her life making loops to brighten hands. I stole her Venus ring while she slept and never went back to that bar. For my birthday, Vivian Bell took me out shopping. She wanted to dress me. I wanted that too. At the bus stop, she untied my scarf and tied it up again in a bunched bun-like braid, just like hers. We went to the store called Ragtime, her favorite. It felt small stepping in, but opened up onto towers of belts and shoes and jackets, old hats and suspenders, scarves and skirts and gloves and baskets of buttons and costume jewelry. I spun around in the pretty pleated houndstooth skirt she'd picked and whooped, "You look hot!" She paid for it without a second thought, and she paid for my bubble tea too because she'd learned I'd never tried it before. The texture of the pearls was loathsome. The tea was far too sweet. When asked, I said it was wonderful. We stopped at 10,000 Villages, and she picked out bangles that went with the skirt. Then we went to Chapters and loitered in the vast aisles of manga. She told me about the ones she liked, which seemed to me to be all of them, and talked about which were popular, and which weren't well known but should be, and which to avoid. She bought me the first volume of Trigun and said to tell her what I thought when I finished it. "Be honest," she said, and locked arms with me. I was upset, almost to the point of tears when we stepped back outside and to the sky growing dark blue. It was far enough in winter that day closed in the afternoon. Soon she'd leave. She'd crush me to her chest and say something like, "See you Monday," and vanish into her inscrutably Christian life. Gentle snow had started falling. So I said, "Have you ever been on the Rito Center roof?" "You can go up there?" I was giddy to know something she didn't. She winced in contempt at the weed smoke wreathing a coven of kids our age hunched in the corner of the garden. Discomfort opened up to awe as we reached the fence at the roof's edge. People scurried on the brown slushy sidewalks below, running to buses, heaving shopping bags under their arms, sending clots of brown-gray pigeons to flutter and settle. And Vivian Bell inhaled deeply from the fresh winter air and asked, "Do you go to church?" I said I didn't. "Do you believe in God?" I said I wasn't sure, which was a lie. I was very sure God wasn't real, but I had enough Jesus-y friends that I'd learned this bit of verbal Aikido. People don't hate you if they think they'll convince you. Snowflakes melting on my glasses turned the streetlights to astigmatic stars. "This is a good date spot," she said. She blinked at the sky. All her 11th grade wisdom and very Christian gravity and theatrical self-seriousness melted like the crystals melting on her cheeks, dusting her fine gray scarf, her cascade of chestnut hair. Her mouth sagged a bit open. Her teeth looked porcelain blue. "Can I tell you something? It's kind of embarrassing." "Sure," I said, dying. "Well," she said, "I think short guys are hot." Dying still, I asked her why she thought that was embarrassing. "I don't know," she said. She blushed. She squirmed. In a sideways way, I realized she was admitting to having sexual thoughts, and she didn't like that very much. "Wouldn't people think it's weird? You're supposed to want someone who's taller. Imagine me walking down the aisle with someone little like you." "Sounds awesome," I said. She laughed. I laughed. I collapsed into her. I shoved her against the metal fence, falling into her beautiful Royal Stuart jacket, into the tatty sweet cloud of her body wash, which still smelled like pomegranate and petals. "Hey," she said. My fingers slipped through her cold pashmina and parted its many layered knots, and I nosed through all that softness to where buttons held together her cardigan, diving in fabric, drowning for skin pressed hot to my lips. My tongue wormed out and wetted her collarbone. "Hey," she said, "what are you?" And my hands had already undone her bright black buttons and slid around to tuck up her shirt and cup her skin-pillowed hip bones. "Come on." And I inhaled deeply her sweat and the wool she wore, and it was all a blast of summer. I knew she'd never crush me to her chest again. She'd never place me in her lap to braid my hair or tug me into a cuddle puddle. She'd forget to ask me what I thought of Trigun. I was right. So I bit down with everything I had. "Get off of me!" She shoved me hard. The fuck was that? I stumbled, tottered, hit the ground as she realized she'd sworn, and clapped her mittens to her mouth. "What?" She strained to hide all the tiny ways she writhed. "You," and strode away without another word. I didn't sleep that night. Somehow, through the quaking and sleep deprivation, I convinced myself the devil was real, and I was going to hell to be spit roasted by cackling cartoon imps forever, because I'd wanted so bad for those pretty teeth to bruise my neck. Around 4 a.m., I turned on my bedside lamp and held it up to the light, the tiny gold cross I'd torn with my teeth from her neck. I work as a shift supervisor at a health food adjacent grocery store in a nice part of town, near the bad part of town where I live. It opened in the 1960s, and its shelves are made from sturdy old wood. The management plays classical music, not for a brand or for the clientele vibes, but because the family that owns the store are classical music nerds. I found a bunch of music I love sticking my head into the back office to ask what's playing. How else would I have ever heard about Shostakovich? I've never really had to wrestle for respect here, and it's never been clear to me why that is when it was the case everywhere else I've ever worked. I like talking to the old people who come in the morning, and the cheap produce and fresh cheese curds. The pay is all right. It's been about 4 years since I dated anybody. I sometimes go to a university bar and let some baby gay paw around in my clothes. I fell in love with a very ace trans woman for half a year. We were walking around in a big cemetery, silvered by a late spring frost, and discussed the shortcomings of Madoka. Out of the blue, she said, "Something's been bugging me, and I can't stop thinking about it." I asked what. "Well, most people's heart logic goes something like this. I don't want to be alone, so I don't want to lose you. I don't want to hurt you, but I don't want to get hurt. If I keep you here, I'll hurt you. If I don't hurt you, you'll hurt me, and in either case, I lose you. But I can be alone sometimes, so I'll accept the compromise. But for some people, I don't want to be alone overrides every other want, because it feels like dying, so you rearrange the formula to make it stable." I asked what she meant by that. If I need to be hurt, then I just have to find someone who needs to hurt me. Together forever. I didn't get over her until I taught her how to play chess. She's extraordinarily bad at it. I don't really care about chess, so I still don't understand why that, of all things, killed off my romantic feelings. Today, it rained. The brutal, driving, bullety kind. Customers stumbled in dumbfounded and dripping. Water drummed on the windows and drummed on the roof while Scarlatti played over creaking carts and booping barcode scanners, and organic coffee beans tumbling greasily into waxed paper bags. I was subbing in at the deli. I know a bit of everything, and it's one of my favorite parts of the store. Shooting the shit with the deli counter ladies is a blast. The first time I realized that some people spend their whole lives working at the grocery store, it was talking to a deli lady who'd worked the counter for 33 years. It terrified me. I've been here 11 years now. From where I stand, it seems just fine. Then today, Vivian came up to the counter. I hadn't seen or spoken to her since that dusk on the rooftop. She'd aged majestically. The fine creases on her face made a pattern you could study as though each line was a verse in a dusty old epic scholars had mined for millennia. Her freckles hadn't faded. Her nails sparkled pink. She wore a puffy white coat that somehow didn't look wet at all. I half expected to see a price tag swinging from the cuff. A gray scarf and an intricate bouquet blossomed at her elegant throat, where you could just see the slender chain whose links surely dropped to a gold cross on her sternum. Her eyes flicked without any recognition to me, and flicked songlessly back to the arrayed meats and cheeses in the deli case. Admittedly, I wear contacts now. A man arrived beside her. One of those clean men who looks like money, like he owns a sports supply warehouse or project leads a company that makes millions of dollars a year programming browser extensions for drop shippers. His face was smooth. He was fit and clean-shaven and wore wireframe glasses. His hair was dark, gelled to look messy. He gave the vibe of someone who's seen far too many movies and invested in a really good surround sound system to better see far too many more. His head hardly rose past her elbows. They smoldered visibly, studying the bricked meats and cheese, saying nothing to each other. She raised her hand to his scalp and ran her nails over the fine-buzzed back of his head, playing with the texture there. She idly leaned over and kissed his cheek. "They have it?" he asked. Vivian shook her head. I waited behind the counter, 3 feet away. Ask, damn it. He turned away and studied the prepackaged stuff in the fridge opposite the counter. After a moment, he said, "Babe, it's here." She read the ingredients on the paper-wrapped organic chorizo. An absent half-frown threatened her expression. She nodded and dropped it in the basket with bunched crinkly kale and frozen corn tortillas. A little kid tottered up to them with a bag of milk about half as tall as she was, and offered it up with all her strength. "Skim milk, sweetie," said Vivian Bell, voice honeyed with peace and still as amber. "Come on, I'll show you the right one." For years, I wanted very much for her to be a closet case. At last, though, I thought maybe she is straight. And even if she's gay, it doesn't matter. I don't know if a person like her would ever be happy in any sense I might mean it. She found something tight and tiny, a perfect happy molecule, and fused with it. She'd never once in her life made a single mistake like the ones I made. All she'd had to do was listen, and she knew who she was, and how to do what was right. Night bellied dark blue as my shift ended. The rain stayed violent. I dashed across the street to the little manga cafe that had opened a few months back to wait for the rain to end, so my walk home wouldn't suck. Dorky couples were there on dorky dates, being cute as shit, sometimes reading the same manga or sometimes reading their own. Looking at the people here, it felt like things had changed quite a lot. For those who made themselves from liking this stuff, anyway. I ordered hot cocoa and a melon pan. It took 10 numb minutes for me to realize I was staring at the complete run of Trigun on the shelf beside me. The fact was I had never read that volume she got me. I'd waited for her to ask, knowing that she wouldn't, and donated it to the library as soon as she graduated. So I sat down and started reading while the rain drummed on the cafe window. I reached the first time vast shouts, "Love and peace!" and realized I was smiling. It was amazing that something like that could still make me happy. The outer rain drove on and on. The cafe closed at midnight. I caught a bus home. I hope you still hate me. Really, I do. I hope you screech on Facebook about drag queen story hours and convince yourself that every gay person wants to molest your sweet little kid, and every time you have to cross a rainbow flag crosswalk, you go up a block to cross the street somewhere slightly duller instead. I hope you flinch whenever anyone says slay. I hope you have weeping meltdowns about all the boys mutilating their bodies with top surgery and HRT. I hope it hurts you every day, knowing how badly I wanted to fuck you, no matter how much you hated me and every single person on earth like me. I hope it makes you queasy. I do. But more than all that, I hope you get your day of the rope. And I hope on that day that it's you. I hope it's you with a noose draped over your pretty fingers, nails pale pink and sparkling, climbing the scaffold to tie a hemp slip knot around me, like a braid or a scarf, hands gracing my hair one last time, your eyes dodging mine, avoiding my flushed cheeks, the open, writhing all over my body, telling you I'm sopping wet, because at last, we're getting off together. I hope it's you. I hope it's you. God! Oh God! I hope it's you. Thank you.
Holy fucking shit!
Holy
That was
fucking
really
shit!
That was great. That was fantastic.
I
Yeah.
feel like I lived an entire alternate universe and now I'm back.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's
alright. Good, okay, test run is a success. Awesome.
Reading adds so much, like the performance too, like it's incredible even just on paper, but like you had like even by your standards, like every line and like mood and tone shift down.
I'm
Yeah.
going back to the AI.
Your performance was really good. It just honestly, it felt like a lot of my like evangelical upbringing OCD nightmares distilled into one thing.
I'm sorry.
That's a good thing for the record. That's a great thing.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
I keep thinking about like the role of manga in this, and like just this weird thing where like again in 2016 there was this whole thing of like anime right and like all the like it's like because it's from outside our sort of culture war like it becomes this weird parallax that like anyone can project what they want to onto and then becomes the site for these kinds of like things where like you could simultaneously have people having queer awakenings and like evangelicals into the same shit and like reading totally different things, like reading the same thing as something totally different.
Yeah, well, I was thinking about like not just like the anime evangelicals I just knew through, you know, it was 2003 and there were 10 nerds at the school and none of the stuff we liked was remotely cool. It was like uncool to like Halo. Like but also just at like
Interesting.
Canterbury, all the really Jesus-y theater kids. Like you remember those guys,
yeah.
right, Gabe?
Sort
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean like I grew up attending a youth group. Say
Yeah. But like it was a major contingent in our theater program. Like I remember there was this girl named Janessa Mann who I didn't have the hots for. She was hot, but I did not have the hots for her. Who was, I think she was like a Seventh-day Adventist or something. And she really liked gay people, but she was very sure we were all going to hell.
I mean, the one
yeah.
Jesus-y person I remember from Canterbury was one of the general kids who I was like, people would argue with him, but I was the only person who argued seriously, and we had these like epic long-running arguments where he would basically be getting all his arguments from like these printout like evangelism flowcharts basically from some site.
But Janessa was torn. She was like, I really love my gay friends, but I'm so torn because they're all going to hell.
Yeah.
To me, like I wasn't out as trans yet. I was a gay man at this point, and everyone knew it. Like,
I'm just hearing that, and I'm just thinking like that just reminds me of like Huckleberry Finn of all things. Like specifically the moment where like Huck just like finds a letter that's like telling him like, you know, it's like a sin to like steal property, and property in this instance means like an enslaved human being. And like he's just kind of agonizing over like every like social force like in his life is telling him like, you're going to be damned, you're going to like have your soul dragged off by Satan if you continue with this, if you continue like helping Jim escape from like the horrific slave structure of the American South. But then he's just thinking of Jim as like his friend, as a human being who he can like genuinely connect to. And then he just thinks about it and rips up the letter and says, all right then, I'll go to hell.
I need to read more of I'm blanking on her name.
Mark Twain.
I gotta
sorry.
I have it downloaded, and it's in my next folder in my iPad. It's not an iPad, in my tablet.
I feel like an
It's one of my-
I'm not ready yet.
An underrated like continuity of American literature, and hopefully the coming, if there's any like tiny silver lining on the coming years, hopefully it produces some more of this. There's this, I feel like, tradition of like moral epic moments like that, or like the Crucible, or like we can argue about whether it's cringe, or like To Kill a Mockingbird, even like that whole sort of lineage of like distilling a secular humanist ethical project into something that like just kind of like crystallizes on page in a way that like doesn't need either the sort of huge argument structure of like the Enlightenment, or kind of like the sort of passive common sense end of history mode.
Yeah, it's like it's something very interesting I see like in American literature and what you might call like Americanized narrative, where like in contrast to like the sort of European project of like beauty for beauty's sake, like there's like this impulse to say no, beauty can like there's this sort of proletarian American impulse to say no, beauty can only be found in doing what's right.
Yeah.
Anything else is like a false gospel, basically.
There was actually a bit... Okay, this is gonna be like, the elephant in the room, but there's actually a bit in Ziz about that, about like the whole doing what's right versus actually wanting to do what you want to do.
My big American lit touch point is Melville, in case that wasn't obvious from every part of your personality.
Oh yeah.
But like even just like I've been going back to Moby Dick a lot lately, because like I was really into Harold Bloom for a long time, and he talks about the demon in Moby Dick is the whale, and like it's this really hyper cathected like mega object that is infinitely interpretable. And it's like, no, the demon in Moby Dick is Ahab. He just has everyone convinced that this fucking whale is like a magic creature, and it just like completely short circuits their moral systems, because there's this whole thing where like Starbuck is like, we have to do what's right and serve capitalism, and Ahab is, no, we have to do what's right and destroy the world for the sake of destroying it for my ego. Like, it's a really interesting conflict.
Now that you put it that way, that seems like the conflict that like American politics has distilled into over the last like few cycles.
Well, it's this like very obvious reading of Melville I've never seen, but like as soon as you go, oh, like he only writes about con artists. All he's doing all the time is writing about guys who jujitsu people into doing stupid shit and thinking stupid shit and going insane trying to figure out what like things mean because somebody's put this stupid brain brick in their face. Like,
Yeah, I just think about like Bartleby, where like the obvious solution of just fire Bartleby just never occurs to anybody.
no, he confounds them with his pure charisma of not wanting to do stuff. Like, or like, you know, just like making him eat, like. I think they do. Doesn't he try to fire him, and then Bartleby just shows up anyway, or something? No, they do fire him, and that's how he ends up in the asylum at the end, I believe.
Mhm.
That does bring up an interesting parallel, hopefully to taper off this, of the idea of the active confusion versus the passive confusion. Because if we compare Bartleby the Scrivener with the ending of Moby Dick, where I believe Ishmael's body is left on a piece of driftwood and is quite literally compared to Charybdis, I believe. This state of eternal swirling and confusion, just kind of stuck adrift.
1 second. Let's head over to Project Gutenberg. Because I remember the orphan analogy is really central to Moby Dick, and that's like the last image is searching for a lost child, found another orphan, or something like that. Oh man, I'm gonna be so ashamed if I butchered that.
I mean, it's fine. The main analytical text that I think of is C.L.R. James's text, and I'm struggling to remember the exact name of the book right now, fortunately.
Oh man, I nearly got it. That in her retracing search after her missing children, only found another orphan. There's no
actually. Oh, go ahead.
Like another Ixion did I revolve? I don't actually know that reference.
Huh. I am reminded actually of like, in discussing like national literatures and like, you know, the presence of manga as an other. Like, one of the first things I was about to mention, just offhandedly, was like, well, it doesn't go for like the evangelicals who like think that all manga is demonic. But in any case, I was just thinking. I was reminded earlier that there's like a point of difference in like the Japanese and American interpretations of Madoka itself. Where apparently Japanese viewers were much more likely to just accept Kyubei's stated intentions at his word, while American viewers were more likely to be kind of suspicious of him from the start and not like believe his stated intentions when he finally reveals that.
Yeah, I think the Americans are right there.
I believed Kyubei because I had heard of Elise Yudkowsky before.
I mean, that was also my thought, but like there is also the possibility that he wasn't really. There is also like Galaxy Brain, the possibility that he wasn't even really saying that out of conviction, but as a form of acausal blackmail. Just saying, you wouldn't want to opt out of this. You wouldn't want to opt out of this system, right? I mean, it would eventually cause like the death of all life in existence, right? So in a way, you're personally responsible if everything dies.
The worst thing is that like it is sort of implied that like other methods could be possible other than the whole like magical girl system, and like they just choose the magical girl system because it's most efficient.
Yeah. Has anybody here, by the way,
resets it, that she creates a new system that like the details of are up in the air forever.
Yeah.
But
Speaking
like
of
she
which,
didn't abolish the problem itself yet.
has anyone here read Null Magical Girl?
No, but I
No.
need to.
No.
You've told me about it.
It's a relatively short read. You can finish it in like 2 hours, and it's also it's canon for one, as far as I can tell. Like, it's official Madoka universe canon, and it is like a bizarro rational fic version of
What?
Madoka, where you end up kind of sympathizing with Kyubey just because like everything else in the setting is just so alien and unsettling.
I gotta
Oh.
read that. Have you read Chicago, the Madoka fanfiction?
I'm not sure if I have or not.
It's have you read Modern Cannibals? It's by the same author.
Oh, I have not read that at the very
Okay.
least.
Yeah, let me pull up the author Bavitz on AO3
Ooh,
has a number of good things.
I've heard that name.
Yes. The his most recent one, When I Win the World Ends, which is a Pokemon fanfiction, was pretty popular. Here, that's his profile page.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, Modern Cannibals is like, it is a quote-unquote Homestuck fanfiction. It isn't really that much about Homestuck. It's just like it's a weird framing device. Chicago I read recently, and it was awesome. It was really good.
Oh yeah.
With just it had several main characters, but like the main character, in my opinion, the one who steals the show is a short Latina who wears a white tuxedo, and her name is Clown Muffle, and she is an utterly invincible magical girl just through sheer fucking bullshit. Like, she just
That's great.
She constructs a reality in her mind in which she wins and just wills that into reality through utterly illegible like magic.
That's awesome.
And as a result, she is
Like
just
Bugs
completely
Bunny?
undefeatable.
Like Bug Buddy. You're describing Bugs Bunny.
Yes, she has a magician theme to her thing, and yeah, she has her Bugs Bunny logic.
I have to say, like, with regards to like the her name is Clown Muffle, you said?
Yes, her name is Clown Muffle.
Damn, that just loops right back onto like Sam Chris' whole thing about like the clown being identical with the initial form of like political and magical power.
Sam Chris has a thing with that too? Because I know that from Graeber, but
yeah, Sam Chris elaborated on it a bunch.
Oh shit, I need to check that out.
By the way, I would like to do something a little unorthodox with regard to this and read a couple of poems that are much older than me, actually, but which I think are very underknown and underappreciated.
That's always been kind of on the table for if like people don't have stuff, so go ahead.
Okay, so both of these are by Don Marquis and can be found in the full compendium, The Lives and Times of Archie and Mehitabel. Both are from the perspective of a sapient cockroach named Archie who types poems in all lowercase by jumping across a typewriter. So here's the first one. The Big Bad Wolf. I went to a movie show the other evening in the cuff of a friend's turned-up trousers and saw The Three Little Pigs, and was greatly edified by the moral lesson. How cruel, I said to myself, was the big bad wolf. How superior to wolves are men? The wolf would have eaten those pigs raw and even alive, whereas a man would have kindly cut their throats and lovingly made them into country sausage, spare ribs, and pig's knuckles. He would tenderly have roasted them, fried them, and boiled them, cooked them feelingly with charity toward all, and malice towards none, and piously eat them, served with sauerkraut and other trimmings. It is no wonder that the edible animals are afraid of wolves and love men so. When a pig is eaten by a wolf, he realizes that something is wrong with the world. But when he is eaten by a man, he must thank God fervently that he is being useful to a superior being. It must be the same way with a black man who is being lynched. He must be grateful he is being lynched in a land of freedom and liberty, and not in any of the old world countries of darkness and oppression, where men are still the victims of king's iniquity and constipation. We all ought to be grateful in this country that our Wall Street robber barons and crooked international bankers are such highly respectable citizens and do so much for the churches and for charity, and support such noble institutions and foundations for the welfare of mankind, and are such spiritually minded philanthropists. It would be horrid to be robbed by the wrong kind of people. If I were a man, I would not let a cannibal eat me unless he showed me a letter certifying his character from the pastor of his church. Even our industrial murderers in this country are usually affiliated with political parties devoted to the uplift, the enlightenment, and the progress of humankind. Every time I get discouraged and contemplate suicide by impersonating a raisin and getting devoured as part of a piece of pie, I think of our national blessings and cheer up again. It is indeed, as I have been reading lately, a great period in which to be alive, and it is a cheering thought to think that God is on the side of the best digestion. Your moral little friend, Archie the Cockroach. And the second, let me just find my place. Won't be too hard. The second is titled, What the Ants Are Saying. Dear boss, I was talking with an ant the other day, and he handed me a lot of gossip which ants the world round are chewing over among themselves. I pass it on to you in the hope that you may relay it to other human beings and hurt their feelings with it. No insect likes human beings, and if you think you can see why, the only reason I tolerate you is because you seem less human to me than most of them. Here's what the ants are saying. It won't be long now, it won't be long. Man is making deserts of the earth. It won't be long now before man will have used it up so that nothing but ants and centipedes and scorpions can find a living on it. Man has oppressed us for 1,000,000 years, but he goes on steadily cutting the ground from under his own feet, making deserts. 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 We ants remember, and have it all recorded in our tribal lore, when Gobi was a paradise, swarming with men and rich in human prosperity. It is a desert now, and the home of scorpions, ants, and centipedes. What man calls civilization always results in deserts. Man is never on the square. He uses up the fat and greenery of the earth. Each generation wastes a little more of the future with greed and lust for riches. North Africa was once a garden spot, and then came Carthage and Rome and despoiled the storehouse, and now you have Sahara. Sahara, ants, and centipede. Toltecs and Aztecs had a mighty civilization on this continent, but they robbed the soil and wasted nature, and now you have deserts. Scorpions, ants, and centipedes, and the deserts of the Near East followed Egypt and Babylon and Assyria, and Persia and Rome and the Turk. The ant is the inheritor of Tamerlane, and the scorpion succeeds the Caesar. America was once a paradise of timberland and stream. But it is dying because of the greed and money lust of 1,000 little kings who slashed the timber all to hell and would not be controlled and changed the climate and stole the rainfall from posterity. And it won't be long now. It won't be long till everything is desert. From the Alleghenies to the Rockies, the deserts are coming. The deserts are spreading. The springs and streams are drying up. One day, the Mississippi itself will be a bed of sand. Ants and scorpions and centipedes shall inherit the earth. Men talk of money and industry, of hard times and recoveries, of finance and economics. But the ants wait and the scorpions wait. For while men talk, they are making deserts all the time, getting the world ready for the conquering ant. Drought and erosion and desert, because men cannot learn. Rainfall passing off in flood and freshet and carrying good soil with it because there are no longer forests to withhold the water in the billion meticulations of the roots. It won't be long now. It won't be long till Earth is barren as the moon and sapless as a mumbled bone. Dear boss, I relay this information without any fear that humanity will take warning and reform. Archie.
Those were good.
That's so based in like so literal, especially considering like invasive ant species that are storming the continent right now between like the Argentine ant, the fire ant, and the raspberry crazy ant.
He saw it.
Wait and never wake up.
It reminds me of Desert, the classic anarchist zine, which I talked about a bunch in my master's thesis. And
there's also like
on the more not optimistic side, but like the alternative side to this, the Return of the Repressed series that's running now, the podcast, where it's sort of trying to excavate a history of like much more sort of like symbiotic like agriculture or like pre-agriculture almost in like early civilizations, the Göbekli Tepe stuff. It's like very, very speculative because we don't have much that remains of this, but it is like picking apart these assumptions that, like, for instance, as soon as you see like pottery or as soon as you see like these mass storage, because you definitely see like large scale food storage, but you don't see some of the standard things of agriculture as we know it, and that there's these more regenerative practices that could have been used because we can see them being used in other places, and also that like anthropologists and archaeologists will just assume, oh, like we're seeing this level of complexity, therefore there must have been class structure, and it's just like, no, you can't say that like automatically.
I think the other thing that the poem kind of like pinged off my head that I've been thinking about lately is like the global extinction of megafauna wherever people arrive. Like specifically, like that was like a massive terraforming event as like the twin pressures of the ice age ending and human hunting driving all the big animals extinct everywhere. So I remember reading like probably a decade and a half ago a Scientific American piece being like, we should reintroduce megafauna to North America, and it was weird just being like if you're a kid who's never seen the night sky and being like, yeah, people used to be able to see the Milky Way. It's like, oh yeah, you know, people rolled up to Australia and there were monitor lizards the size of a bus just like hanging out there.
Yeah.
And how like differently that would impact your relationship to nature. It's just like, oh yeah, no, they're just eagles that can kill you. They're just really big eagles.
Style.
Actually, this is giving me more ideas for the character that Leona's like fighting in this chapter, because I mean, this already sort of came up at the end of the last one, but I can also just sort of like keep running with like, yeah, this is someone who basically sees like has heard of humans despite not like they're not really being contact, and it's like this is like if cane toads came to our planet.
Um, you
Yeah.
ever read Peter Ward's Future Evolution?
No.
So it was this book that came out after that wave in the aughts where like that real first sort of flourishing of speculative evolution as a genre appeared with like Alien Planet, the National Geographic one nobody talks about that I think was also called Alien Planet or Alien Worlds or something. Um, The Future is Wild. So some people went to Peter Ward, who is a very respected paleontologist, to have him talk about the future of life on Earth. And he was like, "This is a stupid exercise. I'm too much of a science boy to like make up animals because I think it's cool and fun." Um, but it was this book that was really profound for how I saw like the phrase Anthropocene hadn't like moved into like a thing that people commonly talked about, but it was still like emerging. Um, but like he specifically talked about like weird, broad evolutionary phenomena, um, like the narrowing of biodiversity, creating a world of just like humans, crows, and mosquitoes. That seems very likely. And it has all this like really chilling art. One second, let me see if I can find it. Peter Ward, Future Evolution. And like in particular, he has this weirdly pessimistic take on it. Like it's presented very pessimistically, which was so odd for the time. But he basically argues that people will last until the end of the universe.
Huh.
He says there's like no like conceivable way that we like go extinct. And it's just like the boots stomping on a face forever, but it's like agribusiness and mosquitoes and the world being hot and everyone having to do cocaine type drugs because the heat is stupefying our brains.
It should
Oh my
have gone in
God.
my master's thesis. But once again, I do wonder how that's going to conflict with anything like AGI. Like I do feel like on some level, like you have this kind of bio and morphodiversity bottleneck at the so-called end of history that corresponds with a political diversity bottleneck, etc. That theoretically, once you get sort of like through the like on the other side of the bottleneck, like my Substack is called Permanent Cambrian Explosion. The like, which is like everything I put like half a joke, but like, um, once you get like real substantive genetic and or physical and or just like nanotechnological or whatever modification, it's just like the diversity tap like floods on again to the point that in something like Mercenary Planet, where I'm trying to write like a lot of species that have substantially higher biotechnology, I kind of have to like suspend my own disbelief to make any of them like coherent species.
Mm.
But once again, like we have right now this is where like family and sign comes in, because we're used to evolution doing all our diversity for us and doing it in ways that have these zero-sum dynamics and checks, and like um right now there's this massive pressure to just, even among people who think they're like call themselves EAC or whatever, to keep us in, like, the trajectory of that bottleneck of the
Sort of like two possible issues with that line of thinking are occurring to me. One is the hypothesis I've told you about, where the Cambrian explosion was literally just an arms race. Like,
that
it
is also
was,
possible, and that's part of probably
yeah,
why we're already locking it down and preemptively engaging in the arms race.
yeah, but it was like it was a very specific. It was like the dimension of light coming into existence as a thing that creatures
Right.
perceive. Like,
Right.
it was like discovering the warp in Warhammer 40K. It was just like if you take this hypothesis seriously, which I don't know, I think the case for it's pretty good, but I'm not an evolutionary biologist. Like it's like there's this external force which, if you can tap into it really profoundly, opens up a lot of evolutionary space and introduces a lot of evolutionary pressure, which really speeds things up. Like, if you look at organisms in cave ecosystems, they don't evolve very quickly. They're like, the reason we find primitive quote unquote creatures at the bottom, like Dumbo squids, have been the same forever. Like, is because they're in this low energy environment. Whereas, it's sort of in line with your thesis work from a few years ago, like having light in there
Right.
as this thing that could be harnessed, like, meant they needed jaws and armor and to move fast and have better eyes and to have better ways of processing that information. But like, I would struggle to see that dimension with the technology that we have without resorting to science fiction, basically. Like,
I mean,
things
I
that,
am
like,
resorting to science fiction
yeah,
insofar as, like, I think, like, whatever happens with...
but
We're already in tech that was science fiction a few years ago with AI. We're not...
But, well,
yeah.
no, we aren't. But like, the other thing that I think throws a difficulty in the Cambrian explosion analogy is there was a lot of frontier, there was a lot of space in the world that hadn't been colonized by life. Like, I've been really fascinated lately with the kite and rift hypothesis, which is the demonstrated at this point fact that the sea was colonized by planktonic life, like the foundation of every ecosystem, by bits of shed animal shells floating out to sea and bringing the plankton with them. And there was all this space. Like, land hadn't been colonized by life. The atmosphere was fundamentally different. Like, plants hadn't heaved out of like the sea barely. Like, I think that wouldn't happen until like the Silurian. Like it was sort of like, there was this flourishing of American capital because they could take land infinitely, and it was sort of a similar dynamic in a lot of ways with the Cambrian explosion, where there was all this space and then it filled up and there was this big decimation of diversity. Like, there's like, I don't know how well Stephen Jay Gould's version of the Cambrian explosion has held up in the intervening 40 years since he wrote Wonderful Life, but his way of explaining it was like, one of the odd things about this period isn't just like the explosion of diversity, it's the fact that so few groups from this period persisted. Like, the trilobites persisted a long time, the crustaceans persisted for a really long time and diversified into insects and spiders and all those things. We have like worms, of course, lived forever, and like maybe jellyfish, but like every other like weird fucking thing died. Like, and
just
like
thinking.
Right.
Oh, sorry. I was just about to say, with regards to like the with like the science fiction thing and like the projection of like how humanity's continued future would go. I think like we're looking at like our current technological level as sort of, you can pretty easily like look at it as like an exponential curve, and I feel like there is a tendency for like everybody at like one stage of the curve to just go, okay, this is it. There's never going to be anything like more crazy than this. Like the first air flights went, and I'm betting like a lot of people were thinking, okay, so we can fly across the air, but there's no fucking way we get to space. Space travel comes, okay, we can fly to space, but there's no fucking way that we could like develop like international like text databases. Then that comes, etc., etc., etc. I
There's
think
no
like
way we could land on the moon.
But,
yeah.
Like I find myself like liking that reasoning a lot of the time, but also I always have to come back to the fact that like history and scientific development aren't teleological. Just because
They're not teleological, definitely.
Yeah, like it doesn't mean like
but like yeah, I'm just saying,
right,
like
we're
there's
hovering
good,
around
like,
the premise of accelerationism, and the premise of
I'm just
accelerationism is that like and that like techno capital or something, we can't even exactly define what it is, which is part of the problem here, is having the same impact on us as light did in the Cambrian explosion. But and the other thing with that is like I feel like to put this in the competing views here in perspective, there's a kind of like there's an ironic double movement where on one hand, Angie, the thing you're describing happens, and on the other hand, like everybody who says like, yeah, this is like exponentially increasing inevitably, then starts like getting disappointed and finding like trying to find reasons why it isn't happening as fast as Nick Land's whole arc
100%.
is really about like in the 90s he's like, yeah, you're gonna be a like what's the phrase in Meltdown, the like
HIV positive Chinese Latino transsexual hooker with implanted mirror shades and a bad attitude.
Right. And then like 20 years later he's like, we're voting for Obama and doing Coney 2012. What the fuck is this? We need to like become fascists because evidently this isn't working.
I think it's interesting. I think that's very interesting, by the way, just to go on a slight tangent. I think that's very interesting just because, like, the way I look at it, you know, Obama and Coney 2012 are just kind of, like, exactly what I would have expected things to look like in Meltdown world.
Yeah.
2020 like, such a weird moment.
It's just that like he's looking at like a bunch of people voting for like hope and change, but what are really like, first of all, like Obama is like fundamentally just like deepening of like neoliberal globalization and continued shedding of like the capacity for the state to like control things. Like looking at it from like his sort of like Marxian deregulationist perspective, it's perfect. Obama completely subsumed the entire, like a huge portion of the labor movement into demanding not even universal health care, but just like a quick market reform that like left almost the entire structure of healthcare intact. That's genius maneuvers on the part of like capital to preserve its own profit structure.
And right, so what happens in part, and this is where I guess we come back around to the question of diversity, which is that, like, okay, we have this accelerating, like, energy input, but it's not creating diversity even as a Lovecraftian arms race. It's creating monocultures and monocrops and convergence towards humans and ants and mosquitoes. or just like McDonald's and like the whole sort of thing of that one pole comic where the racist guy goes around the world to like learn about multiculturalism, but it looks the same everywhere. And this is all like, my point is, without an actual like what Land himself would call like a measurement of teleoplexy, like without a sense of what we're actually talking about here, like both terms here just kind of keep collapsing on these aesthetic misrecognitions where like you just sort of have like a vibe of what should be accelerating, and the thing that's accelerating doesn't care about your vibe.
Mm-hmm. Also, my other question is, like, we've been talking a while about like the second poem, but what did you think of the first poem?
The first one made a bigger impression on me. The bit when it like shifts, like that hit me.
Yeah. What's really stunning to me about that one was that was written in like 1934 at like the latest. So that was like kind of like an unpopular like sentiment within a lot of the country, to put it lightly.
Yeah. But by the way, completely unrelated. I finally started reading. I finally started reading Jabberwocky in Sugahebe. I'm really enjoying it so far because Yuki and Tomo-san are just such an adorable pairing.
Oh yeah. How did you like Looking Glass insects?
It was something
That's
else.
the one where I basically had to stop reading the VN for like a whole year just to like resume where that yeah.
I think that might have happened unintentionally because I was looking at my save game and the last time I played was like in September, so I guess I finished Looking Glass Insects and just needed a break.
What did you think of God in Looking Glass Insects?
We talked about that a couple weeks ago. I think he fucking terrible guy. I hate him.
That's that's the God that's on the side of the best digestion.
I dug up a poem I really like.
Go ahead.
Do we want to continue
sure.
the
Also,
poetry
Lauren
thing?
or Rura, if either of you want to read anything.
I am struggling.
I
have
technically
poetry.
read something, you know.
Okay.
I have two Utena fan fictions. One of them is like me trying to like put effort into it and do something good, and I don't have anything for that. But the other one is just me practicing character writing and having fun, and it's a Homestuck Utena fan fiction.
Okay.
So I could read that one. I don't have a ton. I have like 3,000 words written.
That was a powerfully autistic phrase you just uttered, Charlie.
What was the phrase?
Homestuck Utena fanfiction.
Yes. It's called Two Spirits Plight Mutual Faith in the Rose Garden.
Whoa.
Which is it's a reference to the first chapter of Three Kingdoms, which is like three bold spirits plight mutual faith in the peach garden. So yeah, I'll read that. Sorry. I had to take off my blanket because it was too hot. Okay, let me. A young woman sleeps in her dorm room. It just so happens that today, the 6th of April, XXXX, is this young woman's first day of school. Though it was approximately 14 years ago she was given life, it is only today she will be given a name. What will the name of this young woman be? Enter name. Utena Tenjo. Bzz, that sounds like shit. Try again. Tenjo Utena. Ding. Examine room. Your name is Utena. As was previously mentioned, it is your first day of school. Draped over the chair at your desk is a boy's uniform. You have a variety of interests. You have a fondness for men's fashion. You do a lot of recursive self-improvement, but you are not very good at it. Your life's goal up to this point has been becoming a prince. You would theoretically like to be doing political scheming, but it's really hard to get into. In the meantime, you work on studying math that you're not really sure you'll ever use for anything. Don uniform. You pull on your uniform. God, you look cool as fuck in this thing. What was that sound? It seems someone is attempting to contact you on your era-appropriate personal communication device. Check smartphone. You pull out your Android. You've got a rose cord message from your very best friend in the entire world. Animated adoration, AA, poked gallant aristocrat, GA, at 7:37. Utena! Good morning. I hope you aren't sleeping in. It's the first day of school. My boyfriend is so sleepy. I wonder whether our teachers think you'll be wearing a girl's uniform this year. Lol. What would you say about that? You would have some kind of quip about prediction error or something. Wake up! Good morning. You know I have my phone silenced literally 24/7, right? Yes, finally! Did you get the memo? I actually realized I don't entirely know what a memo is, but did you get it? The thingy about the new e-learning thingy they're testing for the best students here? I have literally no idea why I'm in it, but if I'm in it, then surely my beloved mistress, Lady Utena-sama, is in it. Well, I mean, I just woke up and I had like a billion notifs from you, so I haven't checked my email or regular mail or anything. Let me check. You check my messages first thing in the morning. You scoundrel, you. Okay, yeah, I got it. Sidorm is such a weird fucking name, though. Like, what the fuck were they thinking? Is that like storm, but modified to have dorm in it? Dorms are only tangentially related to education, and storms are not at all. Hardly a good choice of pun for educational software. Apparently there's a buddy system. I guess whenever we set it up, you can be my buddy. Since you offered, of course. Anyways, I'm gonna be late as hell if I don't get a move on. See you at school. Mwah. Eat breakfast. You don't have time for breakfast. You overslept. You'll have to suffer till lunchtime. Forward arrow. Note, the forward arrow has 7 equals signs in it, if you know what that means. Wow, that's a big arrow. Sorry, what? You already have your uniform on, so you're basically entirely ready. Good thing you're a fast runner. Forward arrow. An institution dedicated to the tutelage of the brightest stars of Japan, a land named for the brightest star of all. Warm sea winds approach from the west, bringing dubious tidings of spring. The rising sun shimmers over the water, forcing you to squint. As you make your way over stone bridges up the school's many stairways, there's a tiny note of confusion that the seasons have never behaved as they should in this place. At times it seems winter when it is warm. Classes take the cycle for granted, yet you invariably fail to locate yourself within it. It is the first day of a new school year, and as with all school years preceding it, you have a vague sense that you are missing something about the world you find yourself in. You have a feeling it's going to be a long day. Be the other girl. You can't be the other girl yet. You're too busy being Utena, who's too busy having a random encounter. Forward arrow. As you were entering the plaza, you witnessed a tall, green-haired young man strike a dark-skinned young woman with purple hair. Intervene. You couldn't be considered a prince if you left a young lady in distress. Out of breath. You shout, "Hey, stop that!" You wish you had said something more articulate. In any case, you insert yourself between the man and woman. Better for you to be hit than she. Forward arrow. The man regards you with barely suppressed rage. Who's this? He grabs you by the wrist and yanks you to the side. You trip over yourself and fall to the ground. He grabs the woman again. You have to get up. That's enough. Another man, equal in stature but possessing bright red hair, places a heavy hand on Greenhair's shoulder. Greenhair snarls and wrenches himself away, then storms off. The woman trails him. Forward arrow. The red-haired man offers you his hand. You take it, and he helps you up. Still holding your hand, he kisses it. Kiryu Toga, Student Council President. I must give you my deepest apologies for my friend's most brutish behavior. What might your name be? Tenjo Utena. Please excuse me, I'll be late for class. You take your hand back sheepishly. You wish you didn't do that, but there's no way to object to it without being insanely rude. Time to cut your losses and get a move on. Be Kiryu Toga. Of course you're Toga. Who else would you be? You are a young man with blood-red hair. You have a variety of status markers. As previously mentioned, you are the Student Council President. You are also the heir of the Kiryu dynasty. As a matter of course, you have been selected as one of 13 exemplary pupils to participate in an e-learning experience, the likes of which the world has never seen. You're a bit more boned up on details than your peers, since your mentor, the 14th participant, basically organized the entire thing. Not to mention a personal secret advantage that even he might not know about. And your mentor? Let's just say he's in high places. Toga. Embark upon Kiryu Toga activities. What sort of activities are those? You're basically a regular student during school hours. Unlike the beautiful girl you just encountered, you have nowhere to be. Your first period of the day is free, thanks to someone making an intercession on your behalf. You shoot your friend a message on Rosecord. Chummy Adonis, CA, poked Tenable Irrigation, TA, at 7:42. Your brutishness granted me a splendid opportunity to make a first impression on a fine young woman. Had you the wherewithal to look away from the Rose Bride for but a moment, perhaps you would have hesitated to strike her so. Or perhaps that would have only encouraged you, in light of how you treat the Rose Bride. TA. I thought I blocked you. CA. Old chum. Don't you understand how this world works? You can never avoid the well-connected. TA. Leave me alone, you insane, obsessed bastard. CA. I'm afraid not. You received word that we will be beginning Sidorm today, yes? You'll be my buddy. TA. I will be with the Rose Bride, obviously. CA. Such naivete. I've seen it in the clouds. You'll be my buddy. Tenable Irrigation blocked Chummy Adonis at 7:46. Toga, check other messages. You have approximately 70 notifications from your beloved sister. Like a good brother, you check them. Covetous Cupidity, CC, poked Chummy Adonis at 7:31. CC. Snip, as in snip, like the 70-something notifications and skipping to the end. And that woman said to me, Miss, you can't do that. You're not allowed to do that. And I told her directly and forthrightfully that I am a Kiryu and I may act as I please. Can you believe the nerve of some people these days? Truly, Oni-sama, you've got to be more careful with the women you're talking to. They are treacherous. They will manipulate you and leave you out to dry. I can't emphasize that enough. Please be sure to get my approval of any woman you seek to court. Good morning, Nanami. Have you received word about Sidorm? Oni-sama! Yes, you'll be with me, of course. Nanami, I'm afraid I won't be able to do that. What? You haven't chosen another girl. Was it that woman with the orange hair? I knew I shouldn't have let you be around her. She's a dangerous woman. You can't trust her.
No, I will be buddies with my vice president.
Doesn't he have that strange, unpleasant woman he's obsessed with already? Please just be buddies with me instead, Oni-sama. Surely it will be more pleasant. Without you, who will pair with me? It couldn't be! Are you going to force me to go with that strange woman? I could never.
You'll have to find your own buddy. I have it on good authority that you won't have any issues. In fact, it will happen no matter what you do. No need to worry about being left behind.
Left behind? Oni-sama, please just be my buddy.
Toga, be the brown-haired girl. You're not sure who the brown-haired girl is. Lots of girls have brown hair. You've enjoyed the company of many girls of that description. It's ordinary. Toga, be the green-haired boy. The green-haired boy is too angry right now for you to be him. Toga, be your little sister. Your name is Nanami. At the present moment, you are sitting in homeroom. You have a single interest. That interest is your big brother. He is the perfect man, and it is utterly unacceptable that any other woman could ever have him. Really, it's excessively magnanimous of you to even permit other women to lay eyes on him. You have a variety of disinterests. As previously mentioned, you are disinterested in the well-being of any woman who attempts to steal your beloved brother. You are disinterested in the well-being of that strange woman the green-haired man is obsessed with. You're filling up with rage just thinking about her. This rage is probably unrelated to the fact your brother is neglecting you as usual. Oh, how you wish you could run away with him and enjoy a sylvan landscape together where there are no strumpets to interfere. Nanami, screech like a harpy and vomit on your neighbor's book. Really now, a lady like you would never be so improper. Perhaps you can take out your feelings on the light blue-haired boy in question, though. He's sitting to your right. Nanami, talk to the blue-haired boy. You address him without preamble. You may need to be my buddy for Sidorm. My brother says he's abandoning me. We'll see about that, but you shouldn't make any promises to anyone else in case he's obstinate about it. He doesn't look up from his book. Sorry, Nanami-kun, my sister has dibs. She's being permitted to participate? She's hardly as illustrious as you or me. He pokes the inside of his cheek with his tongue, still staring into his book. Go figure. You harumph. Starting to get a bad feeling about this whole thing. Perhaps I shouldn't participate. Maybe neither of us should participate. And miss out on the chance of quote, a great way to make connections in high places and a bonding experience of a lifetime with your brother? Be serious, Nanami-kun. You only growl at him. Nanami, try to come up with a scheme to fix this situation. You decide it's time for some good old-fashioned sabotage. You pull up rose cord and crack your knuckles dramatically. Forward arrow. First, let's ensure the green-haired man isn't getting any ideas. Covetous cupidity poked tenable irrigation at 7:56. Senpai, I heard that purple-haired woman is planning to break up with you and date another man she's planning to pair with in Sidorm today. Please don't tell anyone I told you this. My brother is an accomplice. He's so envious of what you have with her. He's willing to tear her away from you, even if it means he cannot have her himself. Whatever you do, please make sure you buddy with her. It's the only way you'll keep her. Must the entire Kiryu household fill my DMs with inanity this morning? Shall I await missives from your mother and father, haranguing me about something even less comprehensible? Don't worry your little head about it. I will be with the Rose Bride. You'll have your fool of an older brother all to yourself. Never message me again. Tenable irrigation blocked covetous cupidity at 8 o'clock. He's as immovable as ever. Good. Forward arrow. Next, you'll work on securing your backup. Covetous cupidity poked godforsaken creature, GC, at 8:01. I just spoke with your brother. Is it true you'll be paired with him for Sidorm today? No. Why would I do that? Oh, from what he said, it sounded like you were. Never mind then. Carry on. Did he tell you we were? I believe his words were, "My sister has dibs." Oh, yeah, that's the sort of thing he would say. But yeah, no. Literally anyone but him is fine. I don't give a fuck. Nanami, be the other little sister. Okay, you're only barely his little sister. You're twins, but sure. Your name is Kozue. You're a young woman with blue hair. Not light blue, like your brother's, but a more neutral shade. You have a variety of interests. You have a fondness for making your brother uncomfortable. You can play piano, but you basically never actually bother. You enjoy flirting with roguish boys, where your brother can see. In your off time, you like avoiding all direct conversation with your brother. All this takes up an incredible quantity of time and effort, and you haven't been able to keep up with any of your other hobbies for several years as a result. At least you're nothing like that insane bitch Nanami. At the moment, you're skipping class. You don't actually mind attending. Learning is kind of neat, and you're pretty good at it. But if you skip often enough, then your teacher will bug your brother about it. Talk about perverse incentives. Kozue, text a boy. Nanami texting you actually just gave you a great idea for how to fuck with both her and your brother at once. You tab into someone else's DMs and let your thumbs fly around the screen on autopilot. Godforsaken creature poked Chummy Adonis at 8:04. Hey, so I'm in the Sidorm thing, and I was wondering if you wanted to pair up since we've been talking a lot lately but haven't had many chances to hang out. Figure I'm probably more fun company than any of the other losers in this thing. Kozue-chan, you'll have to accept my apologies. I've already promised my good friend we could be buddies. I truly would enjoy your company more than his, but fate averts is all for no man. Okay. That's a wash. What a weird guy. Kozue, text a girl. If you can't get paired with anyone you know, may as well keep your idiot brother from nobly forcing you to pair with him by refusing any other musical chair. You don't really want to talk to him, though. Godforsaken creature poked Anguishment Gangster, AG, at 8:10. Hey senpai, can you, be buddies with my brother for the Sidorm thing? If he protests, just tell him I said it was okay or I already have one or something. Why not tell him yourself? Well, you know, it's rude. I don't know. It's hard to explain. Can you just do it? Fine. It's all the same anyways. You owe me, though. That's your school mafia buzz. Thanks. Forward arrow. You just kind of sit there for a bit. You're bored. Forward arrow. Forward arrow. Forward arrow. A bell rings in the distance. You wonder what he's up to by now. Kozue, be your brother. Your name is Miki. Holy shit, do you love books! The instant you have a free moment, you're drowning out any opportunity for internal monologue by the handy leverage of someone else's words. Right now, you're reading one about the history of mages or something. How metatextually convenient! When you're not immersed in bibliographic scrolls, you like to play pianoforte, as it were. But there's a certain je ne sais quoi that's been absent from your playing ever since long, long ago. And, well, you kind of buried the lead with all this jibber-jabber. Your mind is pretty incredible. You're a regular boy genius, in fact. Your first class of the day ended just a few moments ago, and now you're free for a bit. Early free periods are the perks of being student council secretary. Your phone buzzes. Miki, check phone. Your friend / senpai. Something about practice tomorrow, maybe? Anguishment Gangster poked Glitterance Tentative, GT, at 9:47. Hey, Miki-kun. We're gonna be a pair for Sidorm today, okay? Senpai! My sister has dibs. She told me she's already got someone and asked me to pair with you. Oh, okay. Nice of her, I suppose. So I've been doing the reading on Sidorm, and we should probably relocate to your house and just get things started sooner rather than later. What about class? Why at my house? Being in a home environment appears to be more convenient, and your house is closer than mine. We are almost certainly going to be exempt from classes today. I'll leave it at that. All right, meet you there in 10? Yep. Well, that's something. Guess you better hustle. And that is all I have so far.
The thought of
was good.
Utena playing out with social media is kind of a low-key terrifying thought.
Oh, everybody's getting canceled constantly in the Otori forums.
The discourse on the Otori Reddit is fucking horrendous.
The Otori Yik Yak is just like the worst spot of like scum in history. It's worse than B. One note I have to say
Yes.
is I did greatly enjoy the little bit at the beginning about the name Sidorm. But as soon as I heard it, I just couldn't stop thinking about like, oh fuck. But if she had written it as Daorm instead, then that could be a very incredible occult pun.
Mm.
Because, after all, Orm is like associated with like the idea of the Philosopher's Stone and alchemy and occult lore. And much of the same occult lore that Utena is already replete with.
Mm.
How is that spelled?
It would be spelled, well, Orm itself is just spelled O-R-M.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, this is
so
making me, like, I just know, has anybody here ever read Walter Moore's?
I don't think so.
Okay, here's a fun thing if you ever want to, Walter Moore's is this, like, German children's author who I read the first, my Blue Sky avatar until I changed it to, the lovely Manul Nar of Kobe Animal Kingdom. It was Rumo from Walter Moore's, and he's written these, like, just really dense, wacky sort of novels about a kind of multi-species prehistory. I read at the same time that I started reading One Piece, and they have the same vibe as One Piece, basically. Like, that they're, like, that kind of anything goes adventure story. Now, I believe there is, but they also have a lot of weird references. So, like, there's one called The Labyrinth of Dreaming Books, which is a, like, one about sort of the book world, Library of Babel of this setting, and there's characters named whose names are, like, puns on Schopenhauer, James Thurber, Nabokov, Nietzsche, like a whole bunch of people. But I also remember the term the Orm being used in that for, like, poetic, for like literary inspiration, for the category that I tend to refer to as Awen from the Welsh bardic tradition that Graves references. And I think about this periodically, but I never made that connection, because there's this one bit where somebody goes, like, the character finds this place deep in the catacombs that's called the Library of the Orm, and it's just every book that has been written under sort of like the true pure influence of the Orm. It's not like the classics, it's like all these obscure little things. There's like a cookbook in there and like just that concept has stuck with me for a long time, because I feel like it's I'm trying to accumulate something like that in my head.
Like, didn't we, like... I forget if you mentioned that first, or it came up because we were talking about it, but, like, we were talking many years ago about, like hidden geniuses, like, these like, secret geniuses who just, like, really zoned in on something extremely small.
Yeah.
like the person who was the best in the world at sewing on a button. Like, oh, okay, wow, I'm under attack by so many cats. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm under attack by a cat too.
Yeah. Okay. Side note: did anybody notice the class specs? Because I
Oh, no.
implied class specs for every
Oh my
single
God.
character that's named so far.
Oh shit.
I squirreled away the words in somewhere in their like introduction usually.
Oh, fuck.
Do you want me to go over them?
Sure.
Yes, please.
Okay. So Utena, obviously Prince, and when she runs up on Sionji, she says she's out of breath. She's Prince of Breath. Then Sionji is rage. He regards her with barely suppressed rage. It's his class isn't revealed yet because he hasn't been introduced. In Toga's introduction, he has blood red hair, and he is the heir of the Kiryu dynasty, so he's heir of blood. In Nanami's introduction, she fills up with rage thinking about Anchi, and she wants to enjoy a sylvan landscape with her brother, so she's self of rage. Kozue, she makes sure to distinguish that her hair is not light blue like her brother's, and she enjoys flirting with roguish boys. She's rogue of light. And Miki, he's reading a book about the history of mages or something, how metatextually convenient, as I said, and his mind is pretty incredible. He's Mage of Mind.
That's great. That feels like occult writing, honestly. That feels like Straussian esoteric writing.
It's also sort of giving the end of the Vane sisters. The classic Nabokov story with a message from a ghost as an anagram in the last sentence.
Oh, that's cool. I haven't heard of that one. But yes,
the final paragraph reads, I could isolate consciously little. Everything seemed blurred, yellow clouded, yielding nothing tangible. For inept acrostics, maudlin evasions, theopathies, every recollection formed ripples of mysterious meaning. Everything seemed yellowly blurred, elusive, lost. And what does it read? It's an acrostic. Sorry, I said it was an anagram, but it's an acrostic. And the last paragraph formed, deciphered by Cynthia, a message from his dead mother, or something like that. Anyway, it's just this very Nabokovian trick.
yeah, I already have all of the classpects and chat client usernames lined up. I managed to perfectly fit them into like the GCAT chat client names. So you have gallant aristocrat, godforsaken creature, glitterance tentative, gone genealogy, adulthood trainee, anguishment gangster, arisal coverage, animated adoration, tenable arrogation, urgists glamour, covetous cupidity, chummy Adonis, cottage core tapestry, and for Akio, my favorite, conjugal groom.
Oh my god. Is godforsaken creature supposed to be
That's
Who is
Kozue.
that?
That's Kozue,
Okay.
because she has that line at one point where she says that she and her brother are wild animals.
Oh yeah. What's Wakaba's again?
Animated adoration.
I like that one.
That's great. I love Wakaba as a character because she has like this is going to sound strange. She has like slightly gross vibes, but in a very, very cute way. Like, she's the sort of character who you just imagine that every time she's off screen, she's picking her nose. And that makes her wonderful. It makes her even more lovable. I love that. I love that her purpose in this story. I love when she's just like being like, I have some coffee, and then like I forget. Um. Was it Sionji? Yeah, it was Sionji after he's expelled. Like he like takes refuge in her dorm room, and he's like, I am a rogue. I am a beautiful prince of existence who the world has cast out. And she's just like, I'll pour you some more coffee.
Wakaba is an important character. She's the reason the whole thing gets started, and she's also the reason that Utena like gets back up on our feet at the end of the first arc.
Yeah.
And I made her seer of space. She's the space player.
Yeah. She's so normal.
With 14 characters, I successfully managed to map out fairly good class specs such that every single of the 14 Homestuck classes is represented once, and you have the aspects. There are only 12 aspects, so like only 2 of them repeat, and the rest are all covered.
So wait, which are the 2 repeating ones? I did notice there were 2 rage, but which was the other?
The other 2 are, one sec, it's blood, because Toga is heir of blood and Akio is lord of blood.
Oh, okay.
Lawn.
And Anchi is going to be Witch of Time. Because of course she has to be witch.
Yeah. Okay, I might really briefly read, just since while Escher's here, just like what I've written, because we were talking about Mercenary Planet yesterday, and like it was one of our usual consultations where it's like, I struggle to articulate a problem I'm vaguely embarrassed to articulate, and then Escher gives some like general pointers, and I'm like, okay, I'll jump back into this, but I'm still not totally sure. So I'll just sort of like, and also insofar as like the ongoing problem with this story is that it has kind of too much dry exposition, but that's also kind of the point, and I'm trying to like this section is going to be a lot of it, but I want to see how sort of interesting or readable I can make it. So just to get like immediate feedback on this experiment. It'll be rough or whatever. There are things that I've deliberately like not quite finished or finalized. At least we have one convergent cultural form here. Using actually, I'll put. I was gonna. I guess I should put notes. Carolyn Bennett Fogg. Status. Confidential strategic clearance. At least we have one convergent cultural form here. Using magnetic poles to determine direction makes sense on basically any planet. Our north and south are their quartz and onyx directions, east and west jasper and azurite. But it's important to remember that Mercury, the direction and supposed substance of the core of this planet extends as far at the same pace. So the mobs right now are centered at 36 degrees quartz azurite, 12 azurite onyx, and 23 quartz jasper from the Rusty Moon hideout. But they're all spread out no more than 19 degrees from each other at the extremities, and from the observations of our spy drones, are still moving closer together. To be honest, the centers in terms of density shift all the time. I'm measuring from the individuals who seem most like leaders, although each one has at least 3 or 4. Our AI picked out fully 14 in the Quartz Azurite mob. Beak and Flag, agreeing for once, have narrowed it down to 6, but I'm not sure this is necessary or useful. The mobs seem structurally a lot like the Internexus. Each is a whole pile of factions and individuals making loose consensus decisions. If we knew the language or the culture or anything at all, this would be a dream for psyops to try and exploit, but we don't, so we're down to brute math. By human standards, at least, the precision is striking, of the movement is striking. We had assumed they were basically standing still because they were moving so slowly, but the whole time we've been flying drones over, they've been spreading out into a dragnet and contracting closer, all in movements too small to draw attention. My hypothesis is that they have some very simple universal directive coordinating the stochastic activity. Wander around, however, and wherever you feel like, as long as you go closer to the target and further from the center of your group, and don't get out of sight of the others. The intergroup coordination would be the most important part. We only see movements counter to these hypothetical directives about 11% of the time, which is still significant. They must be using some form of group-to-group, if not universal communication. I've been trying to figure out the range of those staves, but getting different responses from everyone I talk to. There seems to have been a considerable range of quality between. They seem to have had a considerable range of quality before the network went down, and nobody knows who has what. The Rusty Moons were able to determine the position of the mobs before our drones by eavesdropping on all of them, but we don't know how fast their messages can spread, and the other problem is they're bringing in reinforcements almost constantly. Enough that they must have emptied out their allies in the range of standard staves, so they must either have more powerful ones, enough to reach as far as tuber plug, or relay networks. If those go as far as the other nearest elevation, Pollet Massif, which is supposed to have a very dense pro-adipose presence, Beak is itching to hit it with something, they could have virtually unlimited reinforcements. We're already outnumbered. We need a strong element of surprise, and explosives. On our drone footage, we don't really see much in the way of training, drills, patrols, sometimes what look like duels. Mostly they seem to be just milling around, feasting, fishing, much like the reports of the Internexus itself. They have some massive transport morphs carrying food. Their movements around the crescent are among the most predictable, extremely valuable targets. The one difference is that there are no larvae. Who's guarding them? Are there stone cairns of unattended children sitting around vulnerable somewhere while their parents are off at war? That might be saner than it sounds on Earth. Even with the listening station, I wouldn't have the first idea how to find them. Communication from Tactical Squadron Alpha 4 via Entangleweed. Captain Thurgood Dennison, Delta Force, IEF Tactical Petty Officer, Internexus Zith. Confidential, strategic clearance. Exhilarating, untrammeled victory. I'm starting to understand what the Hadak boys, Privates Ezekiel Marmol, Danny Rigoletto, and Ogre Ito send their insufferable regards, mean about the spirit of war being constrained by too much knowledge, by the ability to construct a clearly defined mission, where even the inevitable unpredictability is reduced to discrete deviations. I'd make them take the bags off the transport morph and carry them themselves when they said something like that, till now, because every situation I've been that you could describe in those terms was a smoking foobar gumbo. This wasn't. Neither of us knew shit about each other, but the things they didn't know about us were more salient than the things we didn't know about them. Marmol wants to add, Aucun jet des papes jamais à nil cham. We took out 3, that's un coup de dé n'abolira jamais le hasard in Dominican Creole. We took out 3 of their 4 battle morphs before they even realized we were there. The way Marmol moves is something else. The transfer of power was simple, 1-to-1. The entangleweed forces already had the civilians under their thumb. When we promised no reprisals, they were pretty happy and helped us get set up with the actual plant thing by which I'm sending this to you. I'm sorry, I don't normally talk or write this way, but I've had a silver cattail shoved into my nose within the past 3 hours, and I just have to think into this thing, and I don't mind. It turns out I don't mind how it sounds. Communication from Temporary Patrol I-7, Ajax Lilywhite, Lord of the Logs, via Denpa, Internexus Pegaz, confidential strategic clearance. The code names they're giving the Internexes, by the way, are Noom references. So the bad news is, someone got here ahead of us from Athon, other code name. They recognized us as soon as we showed up, and it was nothing like the chaos in the Athon briefing. The entire Internexus, estimated at least 700 scouts and fabbers and God knows how many larvae, basically moves as one, not wall, like a 3D carpet with spikes. Is that what a mob's gonna do? Because you may need to reconsider your strategy after you look at some of this footage. It's like fighting fucking No-Face from Spirited Away. We can shoot down. We didn't want to shoot any of them down in the first place when we saw this. I didn't. I followed the instructions that we were to negotiate first. Offered to do the introduction thing, but they weren't even letting us in. They already considered Athon a breach of the Internexus Pact. It's not clear that if they have exactly correct information. I offered to put them in direct communication with Flag, explain what they did, but everyone in the mob who was even considering communicating with us was scared of the other members. At one point we saw someone try to come out and meet us and get pulled down under this cairn of people, and Captain Volozhin took a warning shot. They engaged en masse. Privates Hajaz and Blackwell, who had particularly itchy trigger fingers, must have mowed down at least a few dozen, but we were under like medieval siege levels of fire. I think most of the ones we hit just got taken back into the mass for healing. There's like, if you could figure out where in the formation is what Volozhin was calling the stomach, where they process their wounded and send them back out, because it's a distinct part of the mass. They have like channels to send people back there almost instantly, but we couldn't even get close. We found a place and camped out. Eventually a group and some stragglers found their way down within range of our bulbuls that had been kicked out, presumably for defecting or trying to cooperate with us. The group appears to be what you called Ferris masks, so we have reinforcements and they're eager to come help out as soon as possible, although we're 2,500 meters off course. Mercury Onyx Jasper. But not a lot. Not against a mob.
Ooh.
Done?
What?
I barely comprehended any of that. I think it would be better read, honestly, than spoken.
Yeah, probably.
Because of all the... Yeah.
I was thinking that, like, you could do the classic SF exposition cheat where somebody's like, lays out like some techno gobbledygook and goes, basically, it means the ship can like go through walls or some bullshit like that.
Yeah.
It's like the thing with like the hello.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the thing with like having the schematics there is like that doesn't give you anything as a reader to picture, but also you could do the Donald Bartholomew Deadfather thing and just illustrate it. Like I've been thinking about that a whole lot with like showing the relative space, but like you remember in that book how there'll be like a picture of the arrangement of the characters around like a picnic table or something, rather than describing it, and it's just like dots around a rectangle, but it works really well, especially in the context of that book. And if I said it in the chat, but you had some really good like multi-layered characterization going on in the language that was being used. Like this is partly just like how I've been thinking about narrative writing lately, but I think like that's an axis that like is very telling about these characters because like, you know, maybe they don't like have the words to reach for to do this, or they're in a hurry, or they're just jotting something down to remind themselves. Like, especially with the conceit of so much of the novel being characters' recordings of things, like that could be a real good fix to your exposition problem. So it could be like,
Yeah.
here's the
That's
illustration.
largely
We were
what
fucked.
I'm trying to do there. But
Yeah.
yeah, I can dig deeper into it. 'Cause I think I have to kind of do one go over to just like figure out for myself what's happening, and then do another go over to like stylize it into the character voices fully.
Yeah. And the other way you might approach it is just like making the narrative more fragmentary to what would be most like, gripping.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh my
Also
goodness,
happening to some extent in this chapter anyway, these little recordings are kind of like the interstitial bits that are like explaining
because you're having the chaos ambush, and it would be a really good way to embody the hecticness of this two-pronged rapidly enterprising battle that ends in like something kind of tragic happening, to have things get less precise and more fragmentary, and people not knowing what's going on, and people contradicting each other and things like that in their records.
Yeah.
That's like a really common thing if you read like accounts of battles. It's like people saying, well, I saw this, well, I saw this, will this happen, will that happen, that sort of thing.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good idea, actually. I think that like clears up for some of the remaining stuff that's going to... Yeah, okay, this is the setup, and that's where I'm
welcome to one of our meetings, everybody.
Yeah.
This is what I do. Also, what if you put a Wayne Barlow guy in there?
Rura, do you have anything to close us off with?
I do. I have a set of prose poems that I wrote a couple of years ago in 2023 based on dreams I had. And some of these were previously published on Idiomenon's site. But I rewrote some of them for performing out loud and for putting on a collage series that I'm working on.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, I decided I wanted to read them out loud because I like how they sound. So I'm gonna read them. I'm Lady Dogshit, the only bodyguard princess in this town, and I'll kill anyone who begs to differ. In this ancient valley, I catapult my foot against some dumb motherfucker's skull, carrying death inertia until I'm firm, throbbing, gluttonous, and woven above the shivering body. I feel like Leon Kennedy, my blonde locks glistening in medieval rain. Cobalt rays burst inside the core of ignorant blood drops. After images of the boot disintegrating bone, trailing behind bladed treads. Round and round, like spinning the axe to chop foul beasts in the wilderness of Villa Miss Bitch. Blow you to pieces with my rocket launcher of Romanian make. It never runs out. Infinite ammo. Ha 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 ha. I told you I'm the best at my job. Make that a portrait to adorn the battlements. I'm stood high, my forever warhead impaling Orion's heart. I'd claim the dame, too. I'm craving a nasty tension. Pushing her on top of the shaking headless fuck I just cleaved heel-wise. Take our prize. I own every aristocrat's daughter in these demon hills. When I dream, it means everything. Dogshit went to the brimstone fields, and almost everyone knew her. Here, she serves as the Grave River's tide signal. She went up to her lover, still half melted into blackened rock, and they didn't know her. She bent down and touched their face, hotly agonized, charred and sloughing, and they still didn't know her. She cried and cried and cried, and the tears perished on a scalding under earth, but they still didn't know her. I forgot to explain that all of these it's a set of 6, and they're all disconnected. They're not narratively connected. Last year, the Bureau said there are estimated 27 million omissions in the population. That's a lot of babes unaccounted for. The truth is, the whole of fine and regular society relies upon a grand faction of independent orphan assassins and vagabond warriors, slaves to machine war. I was raised as one of these paramil beauty. In this dreaded body mind, I teach myself how to move through Vulture 1 gray lands. I've trained myself in a million different martial arts this year. Every day, when I wake up, I cut my arms off and look at the marrow-coated spears jagged out, staining my bed in red-tinted honey for 10,000 hours. 10,000 hours of brutality practice every single day. After the requisite regress hours of negative 9,999 to 1/1,000,000th, I rev up an internal menace engine called Funeral Beast, supercharging regenerated fists through a necessary 217 million strikes upon the wall, spirit well calloused and devastating through routine diligence. I'm blessed to kill so easily. I don't need a thing. Between twin sites of ancient massacre laid the shitty bar called Museum. I take a lot of my online dates there. Today, I got drinks with a Vulpine woman named Seraphaxia Q. The overhead lights made her eyes glow amber, glaring down at me past her long and bladed snout. All I could focus on was her massive tits, delicately framed in a red low cut and pushed up by the soft edges of lace underneath. I wanted to use her big fucking paws to cut my cheeks and feed me razor blades, to start cutting my mouth up and lapping the blood with that writhing canid tongue, to call me her lowly junkyard bitch, to stomp me thoroughly and laugh down my throat until I die. But really, I just wanted to be 9 feet tall, with a killer rack and towering thighs. I wanted to feel for myself those kinetic properties of broad heel shotgunning into flesh through the bone barrel. I wanted to call that 5'9" shivering girl with rat fuck hair my whore. I wanted to maul her into meat, fuckable and still. I wanted to keep doing it every day until I was fat on these dreams of inflicting pain. I wanted to be bigger than you. Do you think Selene Tatsuki would praise me, even if she knew how bad of a girl I've been? Sometimes, I feel like all I would need is for her to stroke my hair with those half-wyvern claws, brush the tips of her feathers against my cheek, while piercing me with tender eyes of het-chromatic dagger glass. I'd gladly let go of this vicious glare and weep in her arms. Sometimes, maybe all I need is to coil my misery into a singular point in time. A collapsed moment to let myself crouch down with knees up to my face, cower with arms splayed over myself, and sob and sob and sob, pathetically, forever in this gutter plane, where not even God can see me. Selene, I'm so scared for the world. I'm so scared for you. What's going to happen to us on the cliffside of Dulsword when we're staring down the wasteland they've wrought? I dreamt that I was traversing an ancient and deadly place. Lonely traveler for this repulsive world. Bronze walls dismember me, my gaze creamy and dull. That's it. That's all my poetry.
That ripped shit.
Oh yeah.
Yay! I'm glad people
Yes,
liked
indeed.
it. It was very... I for performing it, I wanted like try and take bigger breaks between each piece, but it is supposed to be kind of like a big onslaught of like dream imagery that I had during a particular point in time.
I think it's okay to try to like short circuit your audience with like a barrage of details, because I find that most people will like find life raft details and kind of cling on to those among all of it. So like if that's like the effect you're going for, I think you can probably just go for it.
Actually, now that I think of it, that's a thing I could add to that like section too. Just like concrete life raft details at the same time as this barrage of like schematic and strategic stuff.
Yeah, I see with this I was like I wrote all of this stuff from the perspective of like my protagonist in my book. As a way to kind of like bridge everything together. Like it still ties back to a lot of stuff that I reference often in my work. And I actually really liked how dense the stuff you were reading earlier felt.
Oh, thanks.
So I think it could definitely work if it was easier to like latch on to like particular parts of it along the way.
I'm doing a sequence in Rockets where just after the moon has been destroyed, for sci-fi bullshit reasons, there's an immediate debriefing in the upper echelons of the corporations that are involved with the moon. And the way I presented it is, it's like not, I haven't formatted it yet, but it's like this in my notebooks. It's 3 columns, so there's like a dialogue going back and forth. There's some people who are like sending, it's like trying to get that sort of like command center feeling where there's people like they're negotiating with some aliens in the background. There's a list of like lost assets going on, and each one of those things is telling its own separate story about like what's going on in this moment. So like the assets thing will culminates in the line, no irreplaceable personnel were lost, for example, and that's like characterizing the whole thing. Or like, you know, there's this moment when they're negotiating with the aliens who are all dead for sci-fi bullshit reasons, where they say, yeah, we can fix the moon for you, but you'll have to let us remove all the eyes and ears from every person and torture them for 5,000 years. And they're like, put it to a vote and see what the board of directors says. Like, so like you could also do something like that. Like I know I'm sort of like pushing the House of Leaves-esque formatting thing, but I've just been thinking a lot lately, like especially with so much of Andata being online, like that's really an angle that you could push, and I think it's like, I don't know, it's something I'd just like to see more books doing. Like I really like, it's partly just loving Donald Barthelme and partly like having House of Leaves be so formative, unfortunately. But it's also just like I just find myself always trying to do things with narrated text, and you just don't have to. Like, there's all these like weird cuts and tricks and architectural things, and you can like poke windows in your stories, and like I don't know. I would just like to see more of it, I guess, is this week. Is where I'm at.
Yeah. By the way, I'm high, and when you said in Rockets, I just like immediately thought of like this place in the city I live that's called Rockets Landing, I believe. And I just started thinking, imagine just like geo-locked literature, like books that you can only read while you're in like a very particular location.
Yeah. I like, I think some people have done some stuff with that, but like I don't know anything specific, and I might be thinking of that Wu-Tang album Martin Scraley bought.
I'm sure somebody has done something. The question is if anyone's done anything interesting yet, which we wouldn't necessarily know. But like it sounds like the kind of thing some academics would have done, but
yeah, it does.
Isn't that almost like geocaching? Now that like we mention it,
almost like geocaching, but it's one of those things that like I think academics would do it because they aren't relying on people buying the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess you could also argue that like tagging and stuff like that, or like people just spray painting poems on walls, is kind of a vision of that idea.
Yeah, I was just thinking about like the idea of like making an ebook where it can't be like screenshotted. It like prevents you from screenshotting it at all, no matter what like domain you're on, and like it's completely encrypted unless you're within like a very specific like GPS range. And so like as soon as you're within that GPS range, it like decrypts itself, and then you have to like you have to read it in order right there in order to read it at all.
Actually,
Have
with
this-
your permission, I will put that in the Solarpunk story that I just missed the submissions window for, but might have finished for like the next of these.
Just
Totally.
have like a shifting, like you have to like you know those, remember those stupid like fun contests where somebody would make like a fucked up kids book with a map to like a secret special necklace somewhere, like something like that, but like if you find like the equivalent of the super secret necklace, you get the key to decrypt the hash that lets you like read the story. Otherwise it's completely scrambled, and if you're like a giga genius, it like scrambles into a complete an anagram of itself that like is still coherent. This is the most fucked up genius shit.
By the way, I was just thinking, if there's nothing else, would anyone like to hear any more bits from Archie and Mahidabel?
Oh, go
I
ahead.
could go for another
I
Archie and
gotta go to
Mahidabel
bed,
before
but-
I hit the hay.
Yeah,
I
I
should-
should too, actually.
fall unconscious, actually.
I'm also just like inputting a bunch of ideas I had after reading that section, including just the fact, like just making explicit the fact that like part of my imagery here is inspired
Ooh.
by something
Whoa.
like an antmill.
Whoa!
I just
I like your room.
I just
Oh,
figured we should, since Emily Dickinson is here. Baby
Okay.
boy. Look at him.
Real
Is he an
quick before I
angel?
go to bed, I wanted to know one last thing about the Utena thing. Is my plan is that you know Haruka, he's going to like die dramatically in the hospital with Shiori at his side, and then Shiori is going to kiss his corpse, thus making him wake up on CrossFit.
Oh. Yeah, do it.
Chef's kiss.
Corpse smooch.
I love when Homestuck gets to have dramatic elements like that without implying that reality is just bad.
Good night. Good night, everyone.
Night.
Good
For
night.
hanging out. I go to bed at like 10 most nights, so I'm so tired.
Okay.
Easy.
Good night.
Thanks. Night.
Right.
Good